I think that one of the, if not the most topical issue that is of moment at this time is the issue of growth that is needed in the economy. We are already aware that in the midst of the IMF test, we have passed two tests already. I remember certainly in terms of the program that I had, the first two tests were pretty much the easiest test to pass. We are told that in this case they're confident that they'll probably pass the third test, which was December, and there are, we're told, some possible storm clouds on the horizon in relation to the fourth test. The truth is that whether the fourth test or later down the line, if strong action is not taken in the arena of stimulating economic growth on a much more aggressive basis than is now being done, then it is not if you're going to fail an IMF test. It is when you begin to fail IMF test. So the central issue, far and beyond the IMF, and more importantly for the people of Jamaica, is how are we going to generate economic growth that can not only generate the revenue that government needs to finance its operations, that can generate adequate reserves of foreign exchange by way of income rather than by way of debt. And perhaps most important, that can create jobs, good quality jobs for the people of Jamaica. That is the basis of economic growth that is needed in this country. The backdrop that we face here now, and ironically, I heard Mr. Pickersgill at a meeting yesterday claiming that they have done more in 2 years than the previous government did in the previous 4 years. I didn't get to hear any more detail of what Mr. Pickersgill said, because certainly the dollar has certainly gone to $107, heading for $108 to one US dollar without a global economic crisis. Certainly unemployment has gone up by about 3% in the period. Certainly inflation has once again gone into double digits, October to October, where in comparison. So if that's what he means by more, then we would have to take it at face value. But in terms of what was achieved, that is a questionable issue, which can be a debate for another time. I'd like to refer to 5 areas that I believe are very critical right now to garnering economic growth on a much more aggressive basis. The first one was mentioned recently by the leader at a press conference, which was the question of the approvals process, speeding up the approvals process. The government has not commented on that one at all since it has been raised critically by the leader. And why is this so important? We are told that right now, caught up in the bureaucratic system that we have of the approvals process, are projects that value somewhere in excess of $50 billion that are now tied up in some way, shape, or form, waiting for approval. That would be by the Parish Council, the KSAC, the Town Planning Department, all of the various departments that are related to approvals for projects. Imagine that, $50 billion in value. That alone has the potential, if that were unleashed on the economy, in terms of jobs, in terms of growth, in terms of acquisition of goods and services. I mean, it's something that we will do some further analysis on. So that needs to be dealt with. The second area I'd like to comment on is the question of the much talked incentives that have been brought to Parliament. The Omnibus Incentives legislation which were brought, the Large Incentives Act, Large Project Incentives legislation which was brought on board. The mere tabling and passing of those pieces of legislation do not in and of themselves create any magic in the process. And the reason why they don't create magic at this time is that they simply have replaced a process of how the incentives were granted. Previously, these same incentives were granted by way of waivers, ministerial waivers, basically. These new laws are basically replacing the ministerial role in terms of granting those waivers. But there's a lot of confusion that still abides by this new system. I've had discussions with manufacturers, and they are very, very concerned because, as it turns out, at this time there does not seem to be a proper, cogent definition of what manufacturing is. And so customs seems to be confused as to exactly who benefits under what regime, despite the existence of these new laws. In fact, one manufacturer recently was heard complaining publicly that capital equipment that used to come in under the Modernization of Industry initiative, which ironically was started by the PNP government and which we carried on when I was Minister of Finance. We signed waivers under the Modernization of Industry. This industrialist was complaining that benefits that he received then, under the new system, he's not receiving those benefits. And so they had to end up paying multi-millions of dollars at the wall for what should otherwise attract the concession, because basically it is raw, downright manufacturing. So it seems that the government needs to sort out this issue on a rapid basis in order for us to begin to yield the benefits of more investment in the manufacturing sector. We must not forget that what the private sector requires for confidence to be built is certainty. Certainty in policy, certainty in taxation policy, certainty all around. That is what builds confidence for people to put out their money to invest in equipment and in creating jobs. So now the minister gave in a statement last week on the IMF, has now told us, now that we have the incentives legislation in place, omnibus incentives, large enterprises incentives, and the business of tax write-offs, which are to be dealt with by a committee appointed presumably by the minister. In his statement, he now tells us we are turning attention to a blueprint for tax reform. So we really see we are hobbling along. We have gone from a green paper that I introduced. We have gone to the omnibus incentives legislation. We have gone to the large enterprises legislation. And now we are told that there will be a blueprint for tax reform. So it seems as if we're kind of, wheels are spinning, but it's like the wheels are spinning on ice. And the mobility of tax reform seems to be somewhat stalled. What is the third area that I would draw attention to if we are to achieve growth in the economy? The question of large projects, large enterprises, major projects. And I'll just single out three of them. The question of energy. In the sitting of the Public Accounts and Appreciation Committee last week, it came out, an administration. Yes, thank you. It came out that while the Jamaica Public Service Company has now will be having a power purchase agreement, we are told sometime this month. The issue that I was trying to get some light shed on was beyond that. It was their $700 million US required for the EWI investment. I wanted to know where is that in the mix of things. And despite the minister's announced intention to sign the license, I've observed that the head of the OUR has now indicated that apparently he too is concerned about the issue of financing. Because obviously, this is $700 million. It's not chicken feed in any currency. And this is $700 million US dollars. And so I think that the public ought to know whether those funds are going to be achieved by the company on a timely basis. Otherwise, the 2016 target for LN liquid natural gas 360 megawatts is going to be just a hope rather than something that is a certainty. The second project, which I've already mentioned in the House, which I am awaiting a comment from the Minister of Finance, has to do with Harmony Cove. And Harmony Cove, which I'm only aware of about a 15% equity that is already available for Harmony Cove. I'm not quite sure whether that equity would involve the government's land, or in fact that is the government land. But as of now, the minister has gone on a trip to China. He has not provided a report to the people of Jamaica, despite the rather substantial delegation that accompanied him on that trip. It would be very important for us to know. I know that Harmony Cove was one of the subjects of that visit, and so we need to get a further and better particulars on whether Harmony Cove. Where are we going with that project? And the third one that is of interest and that requires further elucidation is the question of the future of the bauxite and alumina industry. We know, Leader, that when we were in power, when we got your turn to reopen, we were not unaware of the contribution that made to the 1.3% growth that we achieved in 2011. Certainly, the revival of that particular plant was very important. I raised the issue in the House. The minister, on my raising it, appeared, was trying to suggest that I didn't know what I was talking about. But alas, the following day, he was on a television program. I believe it was my friend Mr. Burford that was interviewing him. And he said an amazing thing. Tuesday in Parliament, there doesn't seem to be a problem. Wednesday on a TV program, he's threatening Rusal with the cancellation of their mining licenses if they don't get on with the business of Windalco and Alpart. So here again, outside of threats to the foreign investor, we would need to get further and better particulars about the real projected time frame for the re-engagement of both Windalco at Kirkvine and Alpart plants.